Hello and happy Monday. Welcome to Believe in Purdue. I am Sam Springer, as always, joined by Grant Flora. Grant, third consecutive Monday that it's been a pretty good Monday considering the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it was the third consecutive Friday night game in Mackey for
Yeah,
Purdue over
yeah,
the weekend. So, yeah, it was a great weekend. They got the win, and the nice thing about it being on a Friday night is now they get nice 3 or 4 days to scout Michigan coming up on Tuesday. But a really kind of a fun game. A little less stress given the fact that Desmond Claude did not play for USC and got a nice home win to hopefully create some momentum heading into
yeah.
a tough game at Michigan.
Well, Boilermakers take down the Trojans 90-72 in USC's first visit to Mackey Arena, and I think it's probably safe to say they didn't like it too much.
Well, yeah, and the final score didn't even really indicate how much of a beatdown that was. It
Yeah,
was more of like a 25-ish point game for most of that second half. So, yeah, USC just could never really get any traction. And
yeah.
who was it? It was Yates who kind of kept USC in it for a while. But
Wesley
other than that,
Yates the third.
yeah, nobody was doing anything other than him.
No, Yates had 30 for USC. Jalen Shelley had 10, and Elijah Elohim, he scored 11. So that was kind of it. It just kind of was then sparse everywhere else the rest of the way for the Trojans. Purdue. Trey Kaufman ran for the third straight game, scoring 23 or more, and you know what? He didn't get in foul trouble this time, and it just showed when he touched the ball, especially early in that first half. He was pretty unstoppable.
Yeah, he got some great post ups and finished strong. USC didn't have any like crazy big or physical big guys that really were able to do much to him, which I think helped. But again, you're kind of seeing Pickoff and Ren's had a phenomenal season. He started the season strong and has just been consistent every game. Like he's been in double figures probably every game, if not close to that.
Yep.
And he's been a staple for them in the post. But these last few games, he's been even better. He's been efficient. He's gotten over 20 points instead of like 15, like you said. He's also rebounding really well. He had 7 offensive rebounds against USC. If he becomes a more consistent rebounder, that adds a lot to what Purdue wants to do. And as a team, they out rebounded USC 48-31. They're really impressive
Huge.
there for the Boilers.
That's huge, especially for the fact that USC does have a little bit of height. They're not, they don't have a closet full of it or anything, but they have enough that you could see them being a little bit more competitive. And I think at one point, Purdue got like the first 8 or 9 rebounds of the game, and USC had 0.
Yeah. And, USC maybe doesn't have like huge 7-foot big men, but they got
Right.
good, strong big men in the
Good
post. But
size.
then they have positional size as well. Like their guards are like 6'4, 6'7, 6'7. And you're
Right.
talking about Smith at 6 foot, Cox at like 6'3, and Lawyer at 6'3. So, I mean, comparatively, especially in the backcourt, USC has a lot of size. So, for Purdue to still be able to crash the boards, especially on the offensive glass, it's 17 offensive rebounds. That's really impressive. And their defense as well, kind of helping them create more of those opportunities to get those stops, create those misses. Because USC only turned it over 10 times, which, I mean, isn't great, but it's not terrible considering the way Purdue's turned teams over recently.
Right.
So Purdue wasn't defending necessarily with their turnovers. It was defending simply by forcing tough shots and getting rebounds.
Okay, I'm gonna get real here for a second, Grant. I saw somebody make a comment, and I'll tell you where I'm going with it here in just a second. Of well, 9 points on 4 of 11 shooting. Can we stop talking about Braden Smith for Player of the Year in the Big Ten? And what I want to say is, tell me you didn't watch the game by not telling me you didn't watch the game, because yes, we've been saying it the whole time that we've been on Believe in Purdue. I know we have, but Braden Smith is way more than just how he scores. He does so much with the rest of running that offense that he had 13 assists, 5 steals. Oh, hey, by the way, let's throw in 6 rebounds, and he only turned the ball over 3 times. That right there is a line. And the fact that he only had 9 points, I don't care. He ran that offense as efficiently and made some incredibly wonderful passes that, you know what? I get it. You don't like Braden Smith. You don't like Braden Smith. You're wrong, but you don't like Braden Smith.
If I wasn't a Purdue fan, I wouldn't like him either. I mean, he's just that kind of guy that he's just a winner. And when he's not on your team, you don't like him. So I understand that if you're not a Purdue fan.
But to say, you know, he only scored 9 points, he's not in the player of the year conversation. Look at the rest of his score or his stat line, and then tell me he still doesn't belong in the talk for player of the year in the Big Ten, because he can go one night and score 30, and the next night score 9, but you're gonna still get the same outcome because he's running that offense the way it needs to be run.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't led this team in scoring all year. Jacob and Wren's been the leading scorer all year long, and his average is still going up. And yet he's maybe more of an outsider in the conversation. He's in the conversation for Big Ten Player of the Year, but he hasn't been considered a front runner or even like a legitimate candidate until recently. Whereas Braden Smith obviously was preseason Player of the Year and has been toward the top of that conversation all year long. He's averaging 16.1 points a game now, which is more than it has been, and it's because he's dropped games of 30 plus and 20 plus a lot more frequently.
Yeah.
But like you said, 8.8 assists per game. That's insane. Rebounding as well. He's got only 4.6 rebounds a game as his average, but it feels like 7 or 8 because especially in the Big Ten, he's really picked up a lot of that slack. And for a 6-foot point guard to make those kind of rebounds, he's leading the Big Ten in steals. Like, this guy's doing everything for Purdue. And he's also got those intangible ways, like you said. He just runs the offense. You take him out of the game for even 5 minutes, and Purdue's offense just looks so much less smooth and so much less functional when you have guys like C.J. Cox, Jakari Harris trying to run the point. Nothing against them.
Right.
It's just Braden Smith really makes it click. And that's the kind of thing that if you're a Big Ten Player of the Year voter, I think you have to realize and you have to consider when you start making those decisions on Player of the Year.
He only played 35 minutes the other night, and it was because they were so far ahead. And that is, in my mind, the reason why it got back to 18 points, the lead, because nobody was in the lineup to run that offense the efficiency-wise like Braden does. Now, I know some people may say, well, what happens if Braden Smith gets in foul trouble? We've seen that. They've struggled. They still won the game when he got a little bit. I believe that was Ohio State, wasn't it? They played a really good first half, and he got in some foul trouble in the late part of that first half, and that's when Ohio State started coming back. And that's when Ohio State started to get a little bit of traction themselves. And you know what? Let it happen. You know what? If he plays the rest of the year 40 minutes a game, I'm okay with it, because you know what? That means he's A, not in foul trouble, and B, he's able to run the offense the way that Matt Painter wants it to be run for this squad.
Yeah, and that's what makes him so good. He talked about how he could go off for 30 or go off for 9. He knows what the best play is.
Yep.
If the best play is for him to pass it to Trey Kaufman-Renn or to spray it out for a 3, that's the play he's going to make. If the best play is for him to take a fadeaway mid-range jump shot, he's going to make that shot. And that's what he's so good at doing. It's the reason why he maybe looks inconsistent from scoring. And yeah, 4 of 11 from the field, not one of his best shooting nights, but like everybody has that. He's not the first person to ever be a Player of the Year candidate and have a night where he doesn't shoot 50+% from the field.
Yeah.
But he impacts the game in every other way. And that's the thing that travels, and the thing that stays consistent is your assist numbers. And not necessarily the numbers itself, but the way that you can pass the ball, your skill at passing the ball and rebounding, forcing steals. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so it's not the same type of basketball that a guy like Zach Edey might play, who was back-to-back Big Ten Player of the Year, back-to-back National Player of the Year. But it has a similar level of consistency. Edey was consistent because he was just big, and the type of basketball he played was efficient. Braden Smith, he just has the skills that travel in so many ways outside of scoring the basketball, and that's what makes him so special.
His biggest criticism as a freshman is he didn't know how to make decisions. He would leave his feet without knowing what he was going to do with the ball. You know what he's done? He has developed into a person that can go into the air. And yeah, he's going to make mistakes occasionally, but for the most part, he knows what he's going to do when he leaves his feet now. He's improved on his game, and you know what? The criticisms that he gets is what drives him to become what he has become now. And I assume he's going to be back next year. But that just is going to there's going to be more that says, criticizing him. He's going to make a mistake or something that's going to drive him to be, a better player next season. You mentioned, having an off night, scoring wise, right? Okay, Braden Smith had an off night scoring night against USC. If Zach Edey has an off night scoring night when he's at Purdue, it's not because he went and had 13 assists or 6 steals. It's going to be Purdue lost because Zach Edey had an off night. Braden Smith doesn't. The offense doesn't rely on Braden Smith to score. It is just supplemented by Braden Smith scoring.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, Zach Edey was the focal point of the offense when he was there, but he wasn't the guy that made the offense run. That was Braden Smith, and that's what you still see this season. And in my opinion, when you look at a player of the year, this is why guards tend to be player of the year more than big men. I mean, there was talk even when Zach Edey was around that, sure, he's averaging these incredible numbers and is just unstoppable force, but he's a big guy and you need guards to pass him the ball.
Right.
Now he still gets it because he was so dominant. But that's kind of the consensus and the trend that you see is guards have a much better chance to win those player of the year honors. And the reason is because they kind of impact the flow of the offense and are in command of the offense in a way big guys aren't. And that's why Braden Smith, like you said, I mean, he doesn't score, he still makes a huge impact, whereas a guy like Zach Edey, maybe not as much. Not that Zach Edey didn't make impacts without scoring,
correct,
like blocking,
correct,
rebounding,
yes.
even passing, but like just not in the same way and not necessarily in as broad or as wide of a way.
You still relied on him to score 18 to 25 points and pace the way for that offense, even on a not an off night. You're still expectant of that. With Braden Smith, you expect him to have to make impactful plays. It's not necessarily by scoring it. It's by, he drives to the hoop and kicks it out to Lawyer, who's standing there wide open and hits a 3, and or to whoever, and a cutting TKR to the hoop. He's gonna make those plays as well. But yet he is one of the smoothest that I can see, or that I've seen, with the pump fake and going up and drawing the foul, trying from 12 feet away. He'll go up and just everybody leaves their feet. They have to know by now, and it's still such a realistic fake that they think he's going up for the shot, and he just draws the foul.
Well, and he's so good at knocking down the shot. If you don't have a good contest, then it doesn't really matter because he's going to score on you. So you have to get out there and guard it. But yeah, you just have to be so disciplined as a defender, which is really tough to do in a guy like Braden Smith. And even USC, with all their just bigger guards, they just couldn't stop him, from the sense that they couldn't stop him distributing the ball and making the right play. I mean, you look at some of his passes. I was so happy that Miles Colvin 3 ended up going down. Yes. It was the only one he made all game.
Boom,
I was like,
and right back down. Yeah.
And I was like, he had to make that an assist for Braden Smith, because that was a phenomenal pass. So they just drew the defense in, got it to the corner. Colvin was wide open. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. He takes on bigger defenders and just finds ways to make the right play. The play you don't even expect to be made, because it just doesn't seem like it's possible to make it. He finds a way.
Well, that 18-point win, second consecutive game that Purdue's gone to 90 points. It's good to see the offense clicking to that extent. And against somebody like Iowa and then USC, who had, I'm not saying that they're a top tier team, because they're not. They're at what is it, 5-7 in the Big Ten right now, so they're in the middle of the packish. But they've beaten teams. They beat Michigan State. Now they didn't have Desmond Claude because of the injury against Michigan State over last weekend. But the fact that you didn't let a big victory going to Iowa City and coming home, and then have that potential letdown going into the weekend, going into a game at Crisler Arena on Tuesday.
Yeah, and offense was great, but they were 6 of 26 from 3. That's 23%. Only made 6 of them. They could have ended up like 14 of 26 with the kind of looks they got, but they didn't, and yet they still put up 90 points. Why? Because they rebounded the basketball, and they did a nice job with TKR in the paint and just being able to score twos. So, yeah, it's just really good to see that Purdue can still win if they don't shoot the three well. Yeah. They can still win if it gets into a shootout because their offense is that good, but their defense is also forcing turnovers, forcing tough shots, getting rebounds. I mean, in any particular game, they can play a specific way that'll give them a chance to win.
Yeah. Yep. Let's we got a game tomorrow at Crisler Arena. It's never an easy time to go to Crisler, but let's take a quick break for the audio podcast, and we'll come back and preview the Boilermakers traveling to take on Michigan tomorrow night. You're listening to Believe in Purdue on the Believe and Lounge Sports Network. All right, we are back. All right, tomorrow, Tuesday, 7 p.m., on Peacock, the Purdue Boilermakers travel to Crisler Arena. It's never an easy time, Grant. And Michigan, ranked 24th in the country right now, they're coming off a big win against IU. Yeah, they lost a lot of that lead and came back and able to push away the Hoosiers in Assembly Hall and get the 3-point win. But going to Chrysler's never an easy time.
No, I've been concerned about this game ever since Purdue blew out Michigan at home, simply because Michigan's gonna have that extra chip on their shoulder now. Plus they're playing at home. Plus this game means a lot in the Big Ten standings. I mean, we've been talking, and everybody has been talking about Purdue and Michigan State looking like the two contenders, the truest contenders for the Big Ten championship at this point. But Michigan is tied in the loss column with those two. And obviously those two still have to play each other. So I think you have to consider Michigan right up there with those two. And now having to go at Michigan with all, like I said, the chip on their shoulder, the fact that Michigan has areas where they can exploit Purdue, it's definitely a concerning game, a game that if Purdue can win, I think it says a lot about who they are and where they're at right now. But it's going to be really tough just for all those reasons I just described.
Well, 2 of the next 3 games for Michigan, well, 2 of them are against top 10 teams, and the other one's at Ohio State. So those are the next 3 games for the Wolverines. They've got to win something somewhere, be that against Purdue, Ohio State, lose to Michigan State, or lose to Purdue, beat Ohio State. They've got to win 2 out of those 3 to keep pace, because if they lose those 2 games against top 10 teams, being Purdue and Michigan State, that A, just kind of deflates their balloon, and B, that puts them even further back in the race, because those are the 2 teams they're trying to keep pace with. So it doesn't get easier in the next couple of games after tomorrow for Michigan. So maybe they play with a little bit more sense of an urgency, but you know what? I think you're right. Purdue, they have the blueprint on how to beat the Wolverines. Now, granted, that blueprint came at Mackey, and that does disrupt a lot of things. Trey Donaldson's not going to have nearly as tough of a game dealing with the crowd as he tomorrow than he did against them in Mackey. But I think they can really set the tone by playing that heads-up defense that they've been playing the past couple of games and doing it very well. Force them into turnovers and do what they need to do.
I agree. They definitely need to get back to that forcing turnovers against Michigan, because the more Michigan has the opportunity to run their half-court offense, the better it's going to be for them, simply because they have such an advantage with Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden.
Yes.
Trey Donaldson will be a completely different player, like you said, because the crowd will be on his side instead of Braden Smith's. And I still expect Braden Smith to win that matchup, but him simply winning that matchup isn't necessarily going to be enough for Purdue.
Right.
So yeah, definitely want to force some turnovers. On the offensive side, they got to knock down some shots. I mean, I don't see this being a game where they can shoot 20% from three and get out of there with a win. It could be. I mean, crazy stuff can happen.
Right.
But it's just going to be really, really tough if they don't shoot the ball well. And they've been a little less consistent from three these past few games than what they have been throughout the season. So, and again, on the road, it's always going to be a little more difficult.
Well, shooting ebbs and flows, and recently, the past couple of weeks, Purdue's 3-point shots have just been in the valley. They just aren't hitting near as many. Now against Iowa, they hit a few more than they normally had in the past few games, but still there's that is that the shine? And then all of a sudden they go against USC and they shoot 23%. So it is I agree. I also think that there needs to be somebody other than the big three that really needs to step up against Michigan because of that very reason. Is the home crowd is going to take a lot out of if somebody other than the big three, and everybody should know I'm talking about TKR, Braden Smith, and Fletcher Lawyer. Those are the three that you expect certain levels of whatever out of. It's the Caleb First, it's the Miles Colvin, it's the hey, let's have Cam Heidi have a night, or CJ Cox. CJ Cox has done it and shown that he can blow up, and it wasn't against a slouch of a team. He did it against Alabama. So Alabama's a top 5 team. He is capable of doing that. So we need one of those second tier guys to really step up and kind of put that thorn into the Wolverines' side and make them have to figure out how to deal with them, and then maybe that opens the door for one of the big three to blow up too.
Yeah, I think the most likely candidate is CJ Cox simply because he's such an explosive player that has a high ceiling. He's like the Alabama game. He's capable of just going on a solo 9-0 run.
Right.
But I also think he's a likely candidate because he's a backcourt player. And this is actually, Purdue for so long has been a front court heavy team where they just dominate the paint. Their backcourt maybe isn't as good as another team's, but it's okay because they can just dump it down to Zach Edey. Right. Now, in this particular matchup and with this particular team, Purdue has an advantage in the backcourt. And Michigan's guards, they're not bad, but they're not like big, aggressive, pressuring guards that are going to cause trouble for Fletcher Lawyer in particular. And so I think that's huge for Purdue. If they can win that backcourt matchup and, again, try and deny that post as much as possible, that's going to help them, especially offensively. But I think a huge key here is how are they going to handle Vlad Golden, because in that first matchup, they double teamed him quite a bit. And because they double teamed Golden instead of Wolf, Golden's not as good of a passer. And so they were able to basically force the ball out of his hands. He couldn't do much. He turned it over, those types of things. But you have to expect Dusty May and Michigan to be prepared for that this time around. So how does Purdue adjust? How do they change their game plan to do something, throw something different at Michigan that they're not ready for, and that might stumble them up? Because if Michigan figures that out, and Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf get into a nice rhythm, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Purdue, and unless they can force 22 turnovers again, it's going to get really tough.
And let's say that is completely possible. I mean, the way Purdue's playing defense, they went into a potentially raucous Carver Hawkeye and shut down a really, really good Iowa offense at times, to where they were able to, that 17 to 5 run or 17 to 4 run to begin that second half, to really kind of spread the game open. That's doable. That's definitely doable. But you're right, Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, and even to an extent on the shooting side of it, Trey Donaldson. He averages 13 points a game. He can score. So, but I think if you can neutralize one of their big men, I think that helps immensely.
Yeah, and you mentioned something else that kind of triggered this thought, but we've talked about how Purdue in road games can get off to slow starts. We saw it against Washington. We saw it against Iowa in their last road game. I feel like we've seen it at other times as well, like against Penn State,
I was going to
obviously.
say Penn State, they didn't even show up. I'm still waiting for them to show up to Penn
Yeah,
State.
yeah. So this is not a game that you can let that happen. This is a game you have to be out there from the opening tip, ready to play. Really, they should try and take advantage of Michigan early on because, even if you get some sort of lead, Michigan's capable of going off on a run at any time. And Crisler's just going to help build that momentum. If Purdue doesn't show up in that first half and they get down, they could easily get down 10 to 15 points in that first half. And that's a hole that's just going to be really tough to dig out of when you're fighting that Crisler crowd and you're playing a tough Michigan team. So that is a huge key for Purdue, is to come out strong in the first half, have a good start. If they can just hang around, stay within a few points, even if they trail by like 5 points most of the game, they can hang around, get to crunch time. I trust Braden Smith a lot. That's the one thing that really gives me confidence that Purdue can play with Michigan in this game. If they didn't have a guy like Braden Smith, I'd be like, man, Michigan's just going to come out here and really, really hand it to them. But because you have a point guard who is your best player and who is so effective at just controlling the game, it gives me confidence that Purdue can overcome a lot of that and find a way to win.
Well, this game starts off the first of 3 in a row against ranked teams, and then that fourth game is at Assembly Hall. The fifth game after that, it's against UCLA, who's been playing a lot better recently. So I think it's really of importance that Purdue gets this. Let's get a win to kick off this 5-game streak. 5 of the next 7 are not really extremely easy, and I say the March 4th game against Rutgers, it's not hard, but Rutgers is never a pushover, but it's at Mackey, and it's a little bit different. But the point being in that is that this rest of this schedule for Purdue is not an easy schedule, so they need to make some statement wins to get people believing that they are for real, because I think there's still some doubt.
Yeah, and they're not first in the Big Ten right now. They will play each of the other top 5 teams in the standings in their last 7 games. Mm-hmm. They'll play the number 7 team. So that's 5 of the top 6 other than Purdue that they have to play. And 3 of those games are on the road. Yeah. You have at Indiana, and then Rutgers. That's their easiest game on their schedule because Rutgers is low in the standings and it's at Mackey. But you still have to deal with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, guy who wasn't in that first matchup. So they'll be playing a different team than they played the first time. And
he was sick.
Right.
It's not a pushover game. It's not a given win.
And they're so explosive of players. Like when you have 2 players that are that talented, you never know if they really get hot in a game. There's nothing you can do to stop them.
Right. So tomorrow's going to be a really, really interesting game to see how the momentum starts, or how the game starts, how the momentum kind of flows through that game, and can Purdue keep it close? Can they keep a lead? Can they stretch a lead? The one thing that we really don't need to see happening is them falling behind by a large amount, because I think that will start the snowball rolling for the Wolverines. But it's definitely going to be an interesting start to this murderer's row, so to speak, of the schedule to finish out the Big Ten season. But you know what? They make it out of this with a winning record. That the remaining part of that schedule with the winning record, I think we're in some pretty good shape. But that brings us to the end of today's Believe in Purdue. For Grant Flora, I'm Sam Springer. We'll see you on Wednesday.